Tate Chronicles now transmitting.
Welcome to the Tate Chronicles on Healthcare Now Radio. And now, here's your host, Jim Tate.
Good day, citizens of the free world, from border to border, coast to coast, and to all the ships at sea. I bring you a warm welcome. This is your correspondent, Jim Tate, and thank you for tuning into the Tate Chronicles. Join me as we cut through the fog that exists at the leading edge of healthcare technology. I'm really pleased today. I have a guest of none other than Dr. Charles Bell. He is a physician consultant and subject matter expert at CereCore. CereCore provides IT and application support, technical, professional and managed services, strategic IT consulting and advisory services, as well as EHR consulting. Dr. Bell has 40 plus years of experience, which includes, and it's a long list here, so bear with me, but it's important, working in multiple roles as a pharmacist in ambulatory medicine, emergency medicine, adult care, critical care, and medical informatics. With all that being said, Dr. Bell, thanks for joining us today on the Tate Chronicles.
Well, thank you. My pleasure.
I'm glad to be speaking with you today because your background, which encompasses both direct healthcare delivery as well as technology, provides really a unique and valuable perspective. It's good to have somebody who's been on both sides of the algorithm. The first thing I'd like to ask you about and get your opinion on is really the evolution of medical informatics and technology in healthcare. I know in your career, you've certainly witnessed significant advancements in healthcare technology. If you could share some specific examples of how technology has transformed patient care, particularly in critical care units.
So what I will start with is I'm going to go way back.
Great.
And I will bring up the device known as the Palm Pilot. I know, painful, huh? But that device was used more as a means of keeping track of patients. So it wasn't really transactional. What really, the biggest transition that I've seen, and I'm going to really point this back to 25 year period, is the technology especially in critical care units, made it easier to track what was going on more specifically with patients. And that became paramount for care, whether it was any type of telemetry or monitoring blood pressure or definitely patient monitoring. That information was available immediately. And where time is of the essence in taking care of patients in that venue, as it progressed, it's just gotten more important. Now, the other aspects of it, blood pressure monitoring and management from that standpoint, just about every function of the body you can really tie to some type of technology now. And that makes a big difference, whether it's oxygen level, blood pressure, blood sugar, all things that are very extremely important in a critical care unit, because what I like to point out is if your blood pressure has changes over the course of a week or a month, if you're not ill, you're not going to have any significant issues. But if it changes over an hour, it could be deadly. So looking at electrolytes and looking at blood sugar and blood pressure, looking at all these parameters is extremely important in being able to stay on top of what's going on with the patients in the unit. And it's a shared information. Nursing obviously is very important in disseminating the information, gathering and disseminating the information, and having that discussion with not only physicians but other ancillary staff, so that the appropriate decisions can be made. And one other example I'll give you: a lot of times dosing of medication is based on renal failure. So being able to have that information on a routine and on a basis that you have it readily available, it makes a difference. And having a pharmacy team involved with that is very important. They gather that information and they share any changes that need to be made with the medical staff, especially with the physicians.
Dr. Bell, one thing that I hear more and more about is the discussion that in terms of the healthcare landscape, we have been seeing a shift from physician-led decision-making to IT-led decision-making. Do you perceive that this change, if it does exist, is impacting the quality of patient care?
It absolutely exists. It's the main reason I got into medical informatics. And the reason I say that is because I realized that as physicians, we needed to have a voice at the table. And then with my background as a pharmacist and a physician, I felt it was very important to have a voice at the table so that things that aren't considered intuitive, let me rephrase that. Some things are considered to be an intuitive thing. If you have that IT background, it's very intuitive. You do this, this, and this, and you get what you need to see. Is not necessarily the way a physician's brain works, where they get in a loop where they can't find what they need, and it's frustrating, and it slows them down as far as providing the care that they need to their patients. So that is why it's paramount that every discipline has a seat at the table when you're working on figuring out how the technology is going to interact and what information you're going to get and how it's going to be presented. It's paramount.
One of the things, Dr. Bell, I hear more and more about in regards to this is really whether it's clinical decision support systems or clinical trials, is the issue of equity. The data sets that are used may not represent the full demographic universe. And so this could be especially true in AI, artificial intelligence, in healthcare. So the data set that these systems are being trained on, while they may be incredibly precise, they may almost institutionalize kind of a non-equitable environment. You have any thoughts about that? Have you seen anything?
Yes. I have definitive thoughts on that. And
Good.
There again, I'm going to have to go back to digging into my background. When I got out of pharmacy school, I started in research. So I did research with Merck and Company. And when I progressed to getting my degree in medicine and had my own practice, I did a lot of studies for pharmaceutical companies, and it was primarily diabetes and hypertension. And one of the main reasons why my practice was sought out to do that when I was practicing in Phoenix was because I had a higher percentage of Hispanic and especially African American patients. And in those studies, a lot of times you don't get information from that demographic. And so the information that you have when you have a new product coming out or information on a product that's been out for a while misses demographics. And so AI, if it can be hyper focused to the point where you're excluding populations that don't benefit from the information that's being presented. That's my concern about AI.
Yeah. Just kind of one more comment that I have about, I know one of the big uses for AI now is the scanning or review and interpretation of radiographic images. And again, the data set of the images that those systems are trained on, what's normal for one population demographic group may not be the same for another. So, as always, the devil's in the details, but we just have to make sure that with the power of AI, that we're not institutionalizing disequity, for lack of a better term. Yeah,
absolutely.
It's a great danger.
I think that you can minimize things on a radiograph. That's a good example. That shows up as quote unquote nothing, whereas to the human eye, it's something. And part of that is because you can put together a clinical picture with that radiograph. And so you have more information to work with to make the determination. And so that is one of my concerns. Now, I'm going to also say where I feel AI is immensely valuable is in really looking at diagnoses. So I'm going to take you to one of the main reasons why we even had the big push for EHRs in this country, Katrina. When Katrina hit, so many records were wiped out. And you think about someone who has a very complicated medical history, let's say a cancer patient who's on a really intricate regimen, those records were lost. So there had to be a way to really capture that and have that available for providers.
Well, and of course, that is a great example. So we're not based really on physical records. Let me move on to something else I'm interested in, and that's the gap between physicians and IT and healthcare. What are some of the common either misconceptions or misunderstandings that physicians may have about IT and healthcare?
Well, I think the biggest problem is that there's a mismatch in understanding what one is asking for. I think you may have seen the cartoon where they want a tree swing, and by the time it's all said and done, the one thing they do is cut down the tree. So there's a mismatch. And so that is why I felt it was so important to have physicians at the table so that there is a constant line of communication to translate what is needed and what is meant by different things. Now that works both ways. Sometimes it's interesting because you can have physicians who are pushing back against the system, and then they get to the point where they absolutely feel that it should be AI. And so there has to be that balance and understanding of exactly what is being asked for. And the only way you know that is when everybody is communicating directly.
To our audience, if you're just joining us, I'm Jim Tate. And on this episode of the Tate Chronicles, I'm speaking with Dr. Charles Bell, physician consultant to CereCore. Let's talk a little bit about your thoughts on best practices for successful healthcare IT implementation. I really, part of my, in a prior life was involved in EHR implementations, and I was a project manager. I would go in a paper-based system and help them cross the bridge to a electronic health record. I never saw it smooth. It was always a nightmare for a lot of different reasons. Part of it was the technology, but part of it was just the change in culture that providers were not used to. Suddenly they were having to almost be data input folks. And so what are some of the aspects, really critical aspects of IT implementation and best practices?
So first and foremost, you have to have all stakeholders at the table and understand what their role, input, and needs are. And with your experience, I'm sure you've seen times where it was a miss, where how do I do things now, and how am I going to do things when we go live? There's no correlation. And so you just assume that you're going to be able to do certain things after you go live, and you don't have the availability. You don't have the system has not been designed to do things a certain way. And the other part of it, the system, there's things that you don't want the system to do that you've done on paper because there's been workarounds and things that you've bypassed, and for lack of a better word, jerry-rigged the system, your processes so that you can get things done. And so it's very important that all major stakeholders are at the table, that you look at how are things going to be processed? What are your processes in your every unit, every venue of care? And you want to know it. What's it during your daytime hours? What's it during your night hours? What's it during your weekends? How does it work on holidays? Because it's all different, but you have to capture that. You can't bake that into the system if you don't capture that to begin with. And then what happens once you go live, you're scrambling to do what you've done previously in some areas that have been amiss. And so you're bypassing the system, and you're creating some things where the system is now not in sync and giving you all the advantages that it's designed to give you if you had all those things in place.
I think a good example that I saw frequently would be a paper-based practice. If they were going to refer a patient out, maybe to a specialist, there'd usually be a form that would be filled out for referral. And all of a sudden on Go Live Day, that workflow doesn't exist anymore.
Right.
And so everybody is scrambling to figure out, how do we do these referrals?
Yeah, and that is a big one, because I think every facility, 100+ facilities I've been involved in Go Lives, referrals have been one of the biggest things. Consults and referrals. Those are processes that you have to work through and be able to align in a way that whoever's going to be responsible for putting in the consult and who's going to be the consultant in that case has ease of access, direct ease of access from the system. And then the referral base is another part of it, and making sure those patients are on your rounds list, so you know who the patients are, where they are. Those are parts that get overlooked. They get talked about, but not in a way that it's just shrugged off like it's going to be a no-brainer. And it turns out to be a no-brainer that it's going to be an issue.
In my experience, Dr. Bell, that shift for whether it's a small practice or large practice, going from paper-based systems to electronic systems, there are definitely best practices, but also sometimes to do proper implementation and go live, there's a cost equation in there.
Yes.
And people don't realize that being pound foolish and penny wise, or the other way, can really be so disruptive to a practice.
Yeah, and I think a lot of that can be alleviated in the training process, in that when you're training providers and users, physicians on the system, that you do what I always refer to as a day in life. How are you doing it now? How are you going to have to do it when we flip the switch? And so you have an idea of how you're going to find your patient, where you're going to find the labs. Just keep in mind a patient that you just saw this morning. So as you build the system, I think as much exposure to the system for end users is going to be a very important piece of it. And so ultimately, the training really needs to be based on the build, which is informed by the information that you're getting from all of the disciplines, and that transition that has to be made. Now, during the process of finding out what information you need to go from where you are now to go live, there's always things that can be changed, processes that can be changed, that you don't have to wait until you go live. There's processes that you can put in place that really prepare you for when you're going to go live, and it improves processes that you already have in place. So all of those things, it comes with a lot of due diligence and involvement. There has to be direct involvement from all disciplines for this to be successful.
I really hear what you're saying. There really needs to be ownership from all sides, and everybody leaning into the project. If you have some naysayers for whatever reason, that's going to hurt things. Something else I've read your comments about preparing for these types of transitions is the importance of documentation.
Yes.
And in particular, when I used to do EHR implementations, we'd create a document so that in the chaos of transition, if I couldn't remember the new way of how to do a referral, I could just go to that page, in a 3-ring binder that would tell me how to do it. So I didn't have to have all that new knowledge in my brain all the time. I had somewhere to look. You have to have that documentation.
Yeah, absolutely. That's another part. I mean, I keep saying how so many parts are important, but
Sure.
yes, it's all important, and the documentation especially. And let me give you an example.
Great.
I've been involved in implementations, and I'll use HCA as an example. When we first started, our first round of hospitals, it was 22 facilities. So there were, decisions that were made. We did have that decision document, and there's turnover. So 6 months into it, there may be other physicians. A year later, there may be someone else involved. And because of that, you need to capture the decisions that were made, so you don't go back and undo something that was decided 3 months, 6 months prior.
Critical, that documentation. Dr. Bell, we only have a few more minutes, but before we go, I want to get your thoughts of really from a practical standpoint, how a healthcare organization can establish a culture of collaboration and understanding between IT teams and the clinicians. That's critical. If they're pushing against each other, that's going to hurt the project. So what are some of the best practices or strategy for really fostering collaboration?
Yeah, and it would be the perfect way to do it is if physicians would understand more on the IT side, which is not likely because of their demands on their time.
Sure.
But I think that it really helps if IT folk have a better idea on the physician's day. What does that day look like? And the decisions that are made, and just the flow. So it may require just going on rounds one day and seeing what that flow looks like, and having a better idea when they have gotten a call from a doctor who's irate, and he's doing rounds and he's seeing 12, 15, 20 patients that day. And that very first one, he needed to see x-ray results, and he didn't see those radiologic results. And the next one, he needs some lab results. So the bottom line is you get a better feel for the frustration. And so there's a little bit more compassion as far as what's going on, and boils down to, if you can walk a mile in my shoes, you have a better idea of what I'm dealing with. And a lot of times, it really needs to be understood that often it truly is life or death. It could come down to that. And so the physician, being the captain of the ship, has to be mindful of that, and is mindful of that. And that's how he carries himself through that day.
Well, and I think, part of that, is you really explained so well, Dr. Bell, is that technology's job, healthcare comes first. Healthcare delivery comes first. Technology's job is to support and make that healthcare delivery, as frictionless as possible.
Yes.
So, I mean, the healthcare delivery comes first, obviously.
Yes.
And so, almost out of time here. Any final thoughts from your side, Dr. Bell?
Only thoughts. There's so much more, that I would like to discuss.
Yes.
But I'm just going to personally say I appreciate the opportunity to have this conversation. This has been a 20+ year journey for me to stay on this and be an advocate for all users, but most importantly, to be a patient advocate. So that's the part about that I feel is very important, that we have these discussions.
Well, I think folks like yourself who come from that healthcare delivery background and understand patient care, workflows related to that, but then understand the potential of IT. That's really a unique perspective. And thanks for bringing that to our audience today.
I thank you very much.
You can find out more about CereCore at CereCore.net. That's CereCore.net. To our audience, thanks for joining me today on this episode of the Tate Chronicles. I offer a special salute to my guest today, Dr. Charles Bell of CereCore. Dr. Bell, thanks for coming aboard today.
Thank you for your invitation. I appreciate you.
You can find more information on this show's program page at healthcarenowradio.com. That's healthcarenowradio.com. Until we meet again, here's wishing you smooth sailing and safe harbors.
Tate Chronicles transmission ending now.